All right, gang, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Forestry 470 Wilderness Map. I'm Dr. Park, and I'm a former Appalachian Trail through hiker. Done research projects in 6 or 8 federal wilderness areas over the years. Federally designated wilderness. We'll talk about what that specific key phrase means. We're going to hear that term a lot this semester. And my discipline within forestry is human recreation ecology. That is, how do we have people existing in wild places, fragile places a lot of these ecosystems end up being, in a way that the ecosystem doesn't get trampled or loved to death by people, and that people are able to be in that place and not trample it, and have a good time, and especially in wildlands and wilderness in specific, have a good time. Feel like they are the masters or mistresses of their own destiny, and not feeling like they're regulated and watched and having the government breathing down their necks while they're off in the woods, hopefully having a good time. So this class is all about how to do that. What's the professional practice? What's the professional ethic? What's the land ethic? What's the philosophy? What's the legislation? What are a whole bunch of on the ground, dirt under your fingernails, field techniques and tool sets to actually make that happen in a functional, replicable, affordable, safe for you, the person out there swinging the axe, and so forth, way. So, is everybody in the right class with that preamble? All right, cool. Good deal. This class is separate from but parallel to the fall semester park management class that I also teach. That one focuses a lot more on busy, high-use front country areas where you have a lot of amenities, services that the agency or landowner is providing to people at that park or forest or wildlife refuge. Stuff like a visitor center, stuff like flushing toilets and Wi-Fi if you're really froggy, and so on and so forth. Wilderness, on purpose, doesn't have a lot of that stuff. In fact, one of the basic identifying features and requirements of setting up an area as a wilderness is to not have any permanent structures, like bathrooms. So, we'll talk about how that works. How, in an era when we have a whole bunch of like science and space age tools and nanotechnology, why we think it's actually pretty important to formalize and require certain places as technology light or technology free zones, development free zones. Let's go through the syllabus like every class always does on the first day. If you guys have any questions about this, stop me as we go. This is all pretty standard stuff. This is mostly seniors. Is anybody here not a senior? Okay, almost half. Is anybody here a grad student? Very occasionally we have grad students in this class. All right, cool. Then we can move pretty fast since we're all basically on the same page as undergraduates. Here's my contact info. The main one to catch me on is just SMS, messages. I'm a blue bubbles person, so if you have iOS, great. If not, someday. You can reach me on any of these other things, all the different social media platforms and stuff like that. I'm old. My day job prevents me from keeping it real. And I go to bed like before 3 a.m. So I may not see messages through social media apps immediately. If you have a question about class or like a field trip or something like that, just a text message is going to get to me first. But you're certainly welcome to use any of those. I promise I'm not going to stalk you on any of these if you add me, because I don't really use these very much anyway. Except for Discord, we have a great Dungeons & Dragons game online that's long running. I do have a functioning university email address. How many of you guys use email as your first go-to in reaching professors? Really? Wow. All the research is like the youth of America hate email. It's sort of the okay boomer of communication methods. That's fine. I get it. I was born around the time of email's advent. I'm that old, and it's definitely a boomer thing. So I do get a ton of spam to that, and I don't always see your messages in email right away. So if you send me an email and then you catch me in the hallway, very common question is, hey, did you get my email? I'll smile and try to nod, but I may be lying. So text messages will get to me first. But if you need anything, email certainly works fine too. The purpose of our course, as listed in the syllabus and in the university-wide catalog of classes, is pretty straightforward. We're going to section out managing forest ecosystems mostly and human management in the specific and weird case of wilderness. It's wildly different than most other kinds of forestry that we're doing. So this class is kind of a capstone for our juniors and seniors on doing exactly that. So we're just going to study the current management philosophy and practices of America's wilderness. A formally designated wilderness area is a distinctly American idea. We'll talk about some of the history and all that stuff in that particular unit. How we get there from sort of the 1800s resource extraction mindset, the manifest destiny, let's clear cut everything and pull all the mineral wealth out of the ground and move it to cities, up through the mid-1900s, the century that I was born in. And how do we get from there to here to 2026, where a lot of the big wildernesses have now been designated as wilderness. There are a bazillion additional areas, parcels of land, mostly in federal ownership, that are earmarked for possible inclusion in the National Wilderness Preservation System. But the whole idea only got started, really got off the ground formally in 1964. So wilderness is a really young idea. Not a lot of other countries had anything like it. The United States was one of the first countries that we can find in recent history that has national parks even. And wilderness is sort of like the Super Saiyan version or the highly advanced version of national parks. So some states do have wilderness areas as well, but the administration of those tends to be a little bit more uneven and unique to that state. So in this class, we're mostly going to focus on the federal system. That's where most of the wilderness rangering jobs are. Most states don't have wilderness areas big enough to have dedicated wilderness backcountry rangers that spend their whole 6-month season away from civilization, doing wilderness work and helping humans and wildlife survive. So we'll talk about kind of the balance of state versus federal stuff and sort of the historical evolution that got us to that bifurcation or that split between state or federal. We'll also discuss the evolution of the wilderness idea and the individuals that have influenced this. So this class has a little bit of like land ethics stuff. Has anybody ever heard of Aldo Leopold? You're gosh darn right you have. Aldo Leopold set us up for success in terms of having things like wilderness instead of having strip malls everywhere. So we'll talk about his contributions. We'll talk about a whole bunch of Forest Service folks over the years who've helped bootstrap up the idea of wilderness from kind of an interesting sort of experiment on land management and forestry up to the vibrant, functional, but also under threat system that it is today. We do have a weekend field trip required for this class because you don't want to look at me talking about wilderness all semester long. I don't want to look at you and talk about wilderness all semester long without getting our toes a little dirty. So we're going to have that available for everybody. Later in the class, we'll try and pull out our calendars and see what weekend might work for us. That'll be like a Friday, Saturday, into Sunday trip. That will be we'll talk about those specifics on the field trip. We are offering this class not just alternate years anymore. This is one of the larger enrollments we've had for this class, which is awesome. And if you're not a senior, it's okay, I won't tell. Yeah, we have a bunch of readings in this class. We don't have a specific textbook in mind because I'm not real happy with the prices of textbooks these days. And I feel like, you know, the economy being what it is, let's just post a bunch of stuff on D2L if you don't mind. And highly recommend putting it into an e-reader with a non-backlit screen or brain, according to functional neuroimaging. Comprehends, remembers, and processes what you read better when it's on anything other than a backlit, like an LED or OLED phone screen. Okay, so print the stuff out. Okay. Don't know if we have a printer in the reading room. We used to. Is that still going? All right. If one or a couple of people print out stuff for their use, and then when they're done with it, pass it on to a classmate, that's awesome. We love to save paper and ink, but you can't get around the neuroscience of iPad and iPhone and Android screens being the worst way to grapple with our stuff. I promise I'm not going to give you anything reading-wise that's just for the sake of looking busy. All the stuff is really, really important for the scope of this class. So, if you're just taking this class to fill up your schedule, you can read kind of lightly through some of our assigned stuff. Some of it's going to be critical and plow through in full detail. But if you are thinking about being any kind of a forester or in particular a ranger of any kind, if that's going to be in any part of your job title, give the readings a close read. There's some pretty interesting stuff in there, and it's a well curated list. There's not a lot of extra fat in there. I'll post that stuff on D2L and very occasionally a bigger file on my own website, which is logan-park.org. As an alternate download site. I know that nobody uses the World Wide Web anymore, it's all apps, but there is some useful stuff in there. And it's got modern web security. So, check that out sometime. It's kind of a heavy website. It crashes some phones if you go to some pages on it. If you have an older phone, I apologize for that. I'll work on it. We'll have a whole bunch of gear available for you for our field exercises around campus and for our field trip. But we are going to, especially for the field trip, require for the class your access to wilderness safety and survival equipment, in particular non-cotton clothing. So cotton is a hygroscopic fiber. It pulls water vapor out of the air and holds it against your body, which is why it's very comfortable and cooling in hot environments. It will also absorb your sweat and the salt and urea in your sweat, and keep you cooled off with evaporative cooling in that way. But that cooling is a safety risk in wilderness work. So anything that is wool, like wilderness workers tend to use a lot of merino wool, like base layer stuff. The lanolin in the sheep's wool is a nifty water repellent. It's warm when wet, and that is a good way to not die of hypothermia or exposure. So you need at least one full outfit, undies on out to thermal and shell layers like rain or wind, that has not a single fiber of cotton in it. Okay, that is a requirement for the class. So you don't have to spend a bunch of money to do that. Be the first person to, after class, head over to Goodwill on the east side of town, and you can get performance fishing gear or Capeline Patagonia stuff if you're super fancy, or just anything that's like polyester or Capeline or any other basically plastic fiber or wool that is going to be hydrophobic instead of hydrophilic or hygroscopic. All right, very important. Start on this early. Once you have that, hang on to it. That's a part of your professional library of clothing that you can just sort of break out for any kind of field work, and you don't have to go shopping all in a hurry when you get your first all-important job right after school, or summer or winter internship while you're in school. Comfort water and morale equipment are optional for the field trip. If you are just rocking your backpack and tent and sleeping bag and so forth, we'll go down the list later on. That's great. If you want to bring a book along on the field trip, even better. You definitely want to have a field notebook. This is no surprise, right? So a Write in the Rain notebook is recommended, but a regular notebook is fine. And recommend bringing pencils instead of pens, unless you want to spend way too much money on a Write Underwater pen as well. Stuff like Sharpies, totally defeated by rainwater. Closed-toed shoes or boots, right? I guess the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail of history and fashion, we've now rolled all the way around. It's Dutch double door action. We got it both ways. You can get Uggs that are also Crocs. What a time to be alive. Those are the wrong shoes for this class, though. You do you, right? But we do need professional and safe outdoor closed-toed shoes or boots. That can be something other than like Keen outdoor sandals, because those typically are not closed. But something like steel-toed boots, probably overkill for this class. If you have them, they work. Long work pants, long sleeves, again of a hydrophobic material. This is mostly for sun and tick protection. I landed in the hospital 2 years ago with a pretty nasty tick-borne illness, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, if you're familiar with it. And it was bad. It was super bad. And we as foresters understand ticks are a fact of life, but we also understand that their habitat is expanding. We are dealing with clonally reproducing species that first showed up in Maryland and are so aggressive they can actually kill sheep by exsanguination. They're that thirsty, and I don't want you to be the next sheep or patient zero for whatever else jumps through ticks to us. So, long work pants, long sleeves, and a plan for ticks and turkey mites. So seed ticks. We'll go through tick-borne disease symptoms, but medicine in the United States is heavily calibrated towards white people and males. So some of those symptomologies might be different for any of us, but especially anybody who's not on that sort of, unfortunately, too short list of medical calibration. So do a little bit of research online, and I'll go through sort of the basic list, but see if you can source anything better than my knowledge, okay? Working knowledge of the risks, environmental impacts, and trade-offs of DEET. And chrysanthemum-based insect repellents like permanone or permethrin. Permethrin is a contact nerve agent. It stings like hell in the cuts on your skin, so don't ever put permethrin on your skin. It is also a cumulative sensitizer, so the more you use it, the more you get allergic to stuff. So at this point in my career, I can't wear a belt without taking heavy-duty allergy medicine because I've used so much permethrin over the years. I'll break out in hives all over my body. So carrying stuff like groceries, kind of a problem. I don't want that for you. So be aware of the side effects of your bug repellents. DEET is an industrial plasticizer invented around the time of World War II. It can dissolve ABS plastic, Lego plastic, which is almost bulletproof. Think about what it would do to the similar polymer of your DNA. And if you want to have kids, no judgment, great, but DEET might not be great for the long-term human legacy. Some milder stuff like picaridin or citronella. People are all over the place on, do they work at all? They're at least less chemically aggressive than some of these other ones. It's up to you to decide, right? You can just do physical blocking with, tape shut the open leg of your pants and wear long sleeves, tuck your hem in, stuff like that. That works okay, as long as you can, get to a shower at the end of the day and pick any ticks that did get in there, and so forth. Okay. I know I'm landing really hard on tick stuff, but ticks are nasty, and with climate change, their range is expanding. The Centers for Disease Control, before they were severely reduced in staffing in early 2025, were tracking almost 20 different potentially lethal human tick-borne or tick-vectored illnesses in southern Illinois, right? Not that we're ground zero, but we're in the middle of the expansion north and westward out of the subtropics. Okay? And all of you guys have taken Tree ID, right? All right, so Schoonover has introduced you to the world of hairy vines. Cool. All right. That's going to be important for our field trip. Our goals for this class are as follows. So this is kind of our map for the semester. It's not in precise order. Every once in a while we'll mix stuff up as like news events happen. Every once in a while, recently a wilderness area will come under threat for delisting. We'll talk about why that's a really big deal to parcel out for something like mining. So when a news event like that happens, we'll kind of pause wherever we are in this list and talk about that and wrestle with the consequences of living in a society that has multiple competing values. But first, we're going to try to analyze historical versus contemporary wilderness management philosophies. That's a lot of multi-syllabic words and practices in the United States. Right? So how did we get started? What's it like now? What's the comparison contrast between those? We're going to also look specifically at the contrast between the continental U.S., CONUS, versus Alaska, which is a totally different regime, mostly in a good way, because Alaska wilderness designation happened later, and some international approaches to wilderness in societies that don't necessarily share all of our characteristics as Americans. So it's really instructive to look at how we're doing it, how other folk are doing it, and see what we might learn from them without having to sort of reinvent the wheel if they've put in some of that effort too. Third, we're going to critically assess the historical evolution of the wilderness idea. So this is like the high concept thing. If you like Dr. Akamani's classes, this section is going to be pretty interesting. We're going to talk about stuff like philosophy, ethics, morals, and how those apply to land management as foresters and professionals. Pretty cool stuff. And we'll focus on mostly a bunch of dudes. Unfortunately, that's sort of the period of history that this all happened in. But in more recent times, it's a much more interesting and wider array of kinds of people at the table working on this stuff, including indigenous folks. Fourth, we're going to sort of zoom in on one piece of this evolution of the wilderness idea and look at land ethic versus wilderness ethics. We'll talk about what an ethic even is. And take a look at some current issues that don't have clear-cut answers. It's important to learn as forestry scientists, forestry field practitioners, that there's not always a black and white answer for some of the things that we face. We have to navigate through sometimes some pretty tricky and competing values and trade-offs. So we're going to do that. We'll run some scenarios, see what you guys think about this stuff, and then compare that against what previous administrations and so forth have done. So that's the in practice part, and looking at human recreation impacts. Half of the mission of this stuff is to have people out there enjoying it, and another really interesting piece is some of the work we've done with Leave No Trace International. There's some really good folks doing hard work on how to help steer millions of people in a sustainable way that meshes well with everything without coming across like a real dick and imposing a bunch of rules on people in the wilderness. There's a way to do that, very well. Fifth, we'll explore off-site wilderness management techniques versus on-site stuff, so hands-on stuff on the trail or in the backcountry campsite or in the trackless area like we have up in Alaska, where there are, by law, no trails. It's just wide open forest or tundra. And we'll compare and contrast those against what we can do off-site, remotely, through stuff like GIS and spatial analysis. So that's the kind of the planning and administration side of stuff. And then as much as we can, as much as the weather let us, we'll try and break up our in-classroom stuff. Like, nobody's really honestly learning that much while you're sitting there. We're going to learn a whole lot more and faster and better doing anything. So that's the goal. We'll develop some on-site management skills for trails and campsites, a whole bunch of measuring, monitoring, maintenance, rehab, construction, design techniques, stuff like that. And all informed by environmental impact assessment, or EAs, or EISs. We're going to take a look at climate change kind of as a running theme throughout the class, because it affects wilderness, and in places where the climate is changing faster than we can manage the wilderness around that climate change, especially at high latitude, places like Glacier National Park, where the glaciers are going to melt in the next 100 to 200 years. We're going to wrestle with that. Like, if it's a moving target on what we're managing towards, what we're trying to get to, if climate is sort of pulling that rug out from underneath us, we need to be ready for that. It's happening already. What do we do? We'll conduct and report an interview with a wilderness management professional. There's a lot of really cool folks doing a lot of really cool things. A lot of them are our alumni, so we can connect with folks actually doing this stuff, and that will be instructive to see what's somebody's job title where they're working in wilderness all the time. How much do folks make? What do they do when it's just like killer weather? Do they just not do stuff, or do they keep on keeping on? We'll wrestle with that stuff, just the very practical nuts and bolts of what it's like to be a backcountry ranger, wilderness administrator, any of that stuff. Talk about search and rescue, all kinds of stuff. So we'll demonstrate and develop proficiency in wilderness safety and survival skills, including ID of hazardous plants, informed use of repellents, and also talk about the safety and survival part of being a field forester in a wilderness context. You don't have some of the safety mechanisms that we normally have otherwise. So what does that look like if your career is moving or progressing along that axis? How do you stay safe out there in a way that doesn't just absolutely kill the joy of being a forestry wilderness worker? 10, we'll demonstrate synthesis of course content and practical applications. I got to put that in there. It's like we're going to read stuff and prove that we're not totally deadheading our way through it. All right, and that's going to culminate in a comprehensive management plan, case study, or scenario simulation. We'll settle on that together as a class, which one of those we want to do, whichever makes sense for you to demonstrate your acquired proficiency in this class. That'll be sort of the last third of the semester, last quarter of the semester kind of thing. Standard junior, senior level stuff. How this class is graded? This class is not super test and quiz intensive. We got a lot of other stuff to work on, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on quizzes. If that upsets you, we can work something out. But if you're okay with that, we can move a little bit further, a little bit faster with excellence. But the class is graded basically on the 10%. So 90 and up is an A, 80 and up below that is a B, and so forth. We're going to demonstrate stuff mostly with on-site labs, the field trip, and practica. Practica are demonstrating doing things instead of writing an essay about doing things. Right? And 1/4 of that cumulative 100% of your grade is attendance, participation, live discussion, written stuff, anything that I can use to sort of take the temperature of your brain, so to speak, and understand what you are understanding and how you are learning it. So, if you have any individualized learning needs, dyslexia, dysgraphia, you need a note taker, you need extra time on quizzes or tests, or you need an audio or video recording of the class, I'm happy to do any of that stuff, right? Like, all of this effort is for you guys. I already know it. It's not a big deal. But if you need any of that stuff, that's cool. I want to be the best professor you have ever had in terms of like knowledge transfer and skill development. I I can do that best if you run it through the DSS office or the Achieve program, whatever it's called lately. So you contact them, say, hey, here's my doctor's prescription for ADHD medication or whatever. Can I get some accommodations in Dr. Park's wilderness class because he's a maniac and I want to do well, and I'm afraid he's going to just, totally spaz out on me. Then they contact me and they're like, this student who needs X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, let's do it full send. And it happens. But you gotta go through the Achieve or DSS office to do that. All right? I can move heaven and earth for you as a professor for your success. But you gotta go through the system to do it. So every semester I have one or several students who are in that particular mode for every class. So don't feel like you're putting me out. It's not weird. I'm not gonna single you out or anything. It's not gonna be awkward. Get the help that you need, whatever, right? This is all for you. So, our typical assignments are going to be readings and then class discussions together about them. On-site and off-site skills, basically, field labs over in Thompson Woods or on the lake, whatever. And then that wilderness professional interview. So, if you have something like social anxiety, this could be perceived as a stressful assignment. That's okay. You can let me know confidentially that you're concerned about the anxiety of that particular assignment. We'll work something out. Okay? The point isn't to make it weird. The point is to get you in contact with your growing professional network so that you have somebody to turn to immediately when it's time to start sending out resumes. Our field trip is super important because talking about wilderness is like dancing about architecture. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Might as well do the wilderness or the dancing. Or both. You do you. It's wilderness. We have a 4 to 6 hour radius from here that we can achieve for our wilderness trip. So what this field trip looks like is I have a bunch of expedition grade backpacks and tents and sleeping bags and sleeping pads and a lot of the basic survival gear. We'll load up into one or more university vehicles sometime on Friday, and then head out to Daniel Boone National Forest, Clifton Wilderness Area, Red River Gorge, a bunch of rock climbing, horseback riding, bears, fire management, all that stuff. Or we can go west instead of east to the Northern Ozarks. There's a bunch of really awesome wilderness over that way. Anybody ever been to either of those areas? So southern central Kentucky? Okay. Or the Ozarks? Awesome. Right on. Cool. So here in a bit we'll put up a list of kind of general directions we can go, vote as a class, and we'll start laying in preparations for that date. Sound good? Any questions so far? Awesome. Okay. So the topic structure, and I'll post the syllabus on our course website here later on this afternoon. Our topic structure is basically a more detailed restatement of those learning objectives. So we'll just kind of go quickly through that. Get rid of that typo. Yet. All right. And so forth and so on. As Dr. Ackermani likes to say, you get the whole thing. All right. Frequently asked questions. How is this class any different than Forestry 420 Park Management? Wilderness management is like the ninja to park management's karate. Final exam period is on the registrar's website. Look for academic calendars under the 3 bars linked to the top left and navigate to spring 2026, and that'll let you know when in that first week of May the class's final exam is going to be. It'll be either that big scenario or management plan or other summative evaluation, whatever that is. This class is not well suited for a traditional like multiple choice or essay kind of exam. We're not going to mess with that. But we'll pick what that format is and that structure is well in advance of the final exam, and we'll decide together as a team. All right, next question. I'm trying to get a job, start a career related to this class. Would you please write me a letter of recommendation? Absolutely. But I can do that better once we've like gone on the field trip and I've had a chance to see your chops and witness your awesomeness, Mad Max style, witness me. We don't have any graduate students this time around, so the class is not different for you. Grad students typically do something above and beyond what the undergrads do so that it can count for graduate credit. All right, that is our syllabus. Any questions? Any comments? Any verbal abuse? Just kidding. All right, let's talk about when we might go on our field trip and where we might go. All right, we have a bunch of options weekend-wise, and I don't personally mind if we keep the field trip weekends away from spring break. It's really hard on morale when we schedule the field trip into spring break. So let's not do that. But any other weekend, basically from now until sort of mid-April is going to be our cutoff. People start getting sort of lots of white around the eyes as we get closer to exams. I don't want to steal you for 2.5, 3 days right in the middle of final exam prep.
February 28th is the choir management.
Okay.
So we can't do, or a lot of us won't be able to do that weekend, February 28th.
Okay. So not the 28th. I believe spring break is the weekend of the
March
7th?
7th,
Yeah.
like the 15th.
15, nope. 2, 29. And then April. The later we go into April, the warmer the weather tends to be and the hungrier the ticks tend to be. So we can start pushing into April, but maybe not super hard. But I'm open to it. Let's see. Alright, so January we could go. The 24th is too soon, 23rd is too soon, 30th maybe. So January 30th to February 1st. February 8th. Let's see. Well, sorry, 6th and 8th. March, April.
Easter is that first weekend of April.
Right? Alright. That's probably going to be a no-go for some. If there are other religious holidays of other traditions or faiths, that's cool too, let me know. 12 and 17 to 19 is probably about as late as we can push it. Alright. Cool. So, pull out your smart computing dopamine delivery device. Open up your calendar app. Use the Western Gregorian calendar. What looks good?
March 29th. That's my favorite.
Anybody violently opposed to March 29th? Is there anything like conclave or anything that's already set up? Sorry?
That's April 11th.
Got it. So let's go ahead and pull that one off. Conclave. Alright.
And then sorry, I'm like taking all the dates off. February 14th is obviously Valentine's Day and also probably the Super Bowl. So.
Oh.
And they say romance is dead in the age of Tinder.
So the 13th and the 14th might not be the best.
Unless we have streaming.
Yeah, in the middle of it, we'll watch the Super Bowl. Like, during the
If it's Starlink.
Okay, so real talk, no cap. Wait, no. Big events like, I don't know when it's Solar Bear, Polar Bear.
It's this weekend.
This weekend, okay, we're not gonna hit that. I'm not. I was at the laundromat during Polar Bear last
Oh.
year, and it was an interesting window on the human experience. All right. What else? We got January 30th, 1st, February 6th through 8th, February 20th through 22nd, March 22nd onward, March 29 onward, and maybe as a fallback, April 17 to 19.
The 22nd is a religious holiday.
Okay, March 22nd. Got it. Any others? Okay, cool. So, for each of these, we're just gonna go in order. Raise your hand, vote for them if you don't want to or can't go that weekend. Make sense? Alright, so we're gonna drop off the back of the list, the highest ranked ones. Alright, January 30th through Feb 1st.
If we don't want that,
Vote for it if you do not want it. 8. Alright, thank you. February 6th through 8th, before Valentine's Day. 1, 2. Do not want to, okay. February 20th through 22nd. Vote if you don't want to go that one. 1, 2, 3. 15, 22, March 29th into Ocean April. Yeah. 1. Okay. And then April 17 through 19. Fair. 6. Is there something going on there, or is it just like end of the semester, let's hold it off that? Heard. Okay. Cool. So that one, January 30th. And that leaves March 29th, February 6th to 8th, and February 20 to 22nd. Of those, they're all pretty close, but 29th is our leader for the moment. Okay. What if we, hear me out, what if we shot for February 20th and then had March 29th onward as a fallback in case it's like a total soup sandwich, sideways rain in late February? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Let's do that. So, go ahead and pencil in. If you are not able to to pay rent, you have got to work every weekend. I get it. I don't want to be a problem in that regard. So if you just cannot carve out 2.5 days for a field trip for this class, we can do an alternative assignment, but it's a lot of the same stuff, and it's a lot less fun doing it on your own versus in a class with an instructor. So you do have flexibility in that. If you're not comfortable or you're not able to make our field trip, we're not going to force it. That is unsafe, but highly recommend going on the trip. Okay, cool. Yeah, we got time. Where would we like to go? There's the Daniel Boone National Forest, Clifty Wilderness. And Miguel's world famous rock climber dirt bag pizza place in the middle of nowhere. All right. We also have the Ozarks. mostly in Missouri, not so much Arkansas. It gets to be a bit of a longer drive. We don't have a lot of wilderness areas up north of us within our 6-hour maximum radius. Corn desert up there, right? Not really conducive to wilderness values, rugged individualism. So, instead of looking northward, we could maybe stretch it to somewhere like Sleeping Bear Dunes, but that's not really wilderness. It's like 2 million visitors a year out of Chicago and Gary, Indiana. Our third excellent option is right here. We'll talk in our history section about how the Shawnee National Forest came to be one of very few places on the face of the planet that has 7 federally designated wilderness areas in about a 1-hour radius from various points in southern Illinois. That's amazing. That is a luxury of a gift. From old dead folks to us. Might as well use it. So, upside of Shawnee National Forest, we gotta spend like maybe a maximum of an hour getting anywhere, and we have a whole bunch of wilderness areas that are pretty variegated in the Shawnee Bluff country. Disadvantages are, it's less sexy because it's in our backyard, but maybe the best wilderness is the one we fell in love with along the way. All right. Among these 3 general options, does anybody have any other nominations to the list? Places you've heard about, never got to go. Let me complicate this just a little bit by offering a water-based form of wilderness called a national wild river, national river system, like Ozark National Scenic was. When you're on the water, you're wild. They actively manage that landscape so that it is not feeling or looking or functioning ecologically or socially like a working river like the Ohio or Mississippi. They actually dynamite trees into the water, so you have to go around them in a canoe. Pretty interesting stuff. We can put that on the list, or if anybody's super not excited about being in a canoe in February, you can vote against that. All right, so hands up for a water-based wilderness like Black River, 11 Point, Ozark Scenic Riverways, Wild Scenic Riverways. Hands up if you were interested in a flowing wilderness instead of a backpacking wilderness. Wow, I suck at sales. All right, I should be a professor instead. Okay, cool. Vote for affirmatively, positively for any of these 3. We'll see what shakes out. All right. The content, skills, applications are all the same, just different settings. So, hands up if you are okay, and you can vote for as many as you want. If you're interested in Clifty Wilderness, Sandy Boone National Forest, down Kentucky, Tennessee way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, unanimous, 13. Okay. And Ozarks. Out past the home of Throwed Rolls, which we sometimes stop at on the way back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sounds good. And right here for Shawnee National Forest, if you're interested in sampling our homegrown wilderness on one of the smallest national forests with the most wilderness densely packed national forests in the world, vote for Shawnee National Forest. Shawnee Vegas. Oh, 3. God, I am so bad at this. All right. Cool. Looks like we're going to Clifty Wilderness. So, we will set our GPSs for that, unless you don't want to use advanced space age technologies in the wilderness. And we can use paper maps and compass, the way that God's intended. Okay, cool. So, make a note for end of February, February 20th to the 22nd, for Clifty Wilderness. It's about a 5.5–6 hour drive. And we have a little bit of civilization in the form of a gateway community, and then we drop off into the wilderness, capital W. Okay? Cool. That's most of what we can accomplish for today. So, see you guys on Wednesday, same time, same channel. And I try to get class session uploads hang on to those note cards for now. I try to get class session uploads to my YouTube channel for your review. Watching a YouTube video of a screen recording of a class about something outside is about the most boring way you can lose an hour of your life. So prioritize being in class over catching the quick.
Question.
Yeah.
For this, is it gonna be like backpacking or gonna be backpacking or like camping? And like because I'm like a pretty bad car accident. I was the one that got hit by a car on campus and so that's why I was going for the 29th as well. Because I can't I just got out of course like 2 weeks ago. I think I'd be okay with like a month and a half, but like it's like I don't want to be able to carry like a backpack, which is fine if I do because I don't have. I'm NPT and stuff, and I'll talk to my physical therapist.
Yeah.
and stuff,
So
but-
I got you back on that.
Yeah, okay.
We have a range of mobility capacities, just
Okay.
like not even from injuries, just like in general people are. So it is backpacking based, but the point is to get as few miles as possible because when we're splitting it out backpacking, we're not like learning and practicing stuff and all
Okay.
that. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I was just like, oh, for sure. I'm slowly but surely getting there, but I have a while still until I can walk.
yeah, totally fine. Like the last thing I want to do is make it worse, right?
No, it's
He can be
just
like,
good.
Dr. Park gave me this scar.
Dr. Park is trying to break me, Lord.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotta go to my doctor's back at home again. Not good.
When are we gonna hear about summer camp?
I was just talking with Brent about that earlier today. So first week of February, we're gonna get everybody together for information meetings both east and west. And I'm talking
So
with
excited.
earlier this week about extending the
I will
west
come back you up if you
for
want.
anybody who wants to.
Literally, either of us. If
Why
you
not
want like
both?
well, literally, I'm so serious. If you need like a student rep, like the two of us will like fight tooth, or at least I will fight tooth and nail for that.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
I agree.
Katie.